Hey, good afternoon everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Wanted to make a 5-month review of using the lithium iron phosphate battery bank, which was new to me. And to start it off, we've got the 500 watts monocrystalline panels pumping into the system right now. As you can see, it's an absolutely gorgeous day in Hawaii today, almost at a full charge early in the day. Clear blue skies, just couldn't be any better. So let's go inside and I'll go over every single thing and give you a pros and cons on how everything's working right now. Just another real quick shot just to show you just how beautiful blue skies we've got going today. After the past few weeks of being pretty dark and rainy, this is fantastic. So the heart of the system, of course, are the two 300 amp hour lithium batteries from Chins. They have just now gone over 5 months of continuous use. Well, the first one has. The second one I tied up a couple months ago, I think it's been now. But anyway, 5 months of me using the lithium iron phosphate batteries. And if you've been following the series, you know that I had a little mishap. I'm going to go over some of that a little bit more, what I've learned. But while I was down for just a few days taking care of a short circuit that I had, that was my fault. I had to rely on a couple of old Trojan batteries, which are great for lead acid. But let me tell you, after running on lithium for the past 5 months, going back to lead acid felt like taking a few steps backwards. They were good batteries, those lead acid, but they cannot compare to these. Couldn't be happier with the Chins. 5 months in, absolutely zero problems with them. They hold a charge. I've never even taken them close to zero. Not for lack of trying, it's just don't use a ton of power around here, and these babies do hold a charge. So highly recommend the Chins. Can't go wrong with those. Backed by superior customer service. And now I'm going to go over the rest of the system and give you some pros and cons of some of the other things that I'm using. So next would be that reliable 3000 watt pure sine wave inverter, 12 volt. It has also worked fantastic for us out here. The only complaint that I have about that at all is that the fan is just a little bit loud when it does kick on. And as I've mentioned before, it does not kick on that often, but when it kicks on, it's a little loud, and you would want to consider that if you were trying to put this in a living space or a tight space, if you were living in a van or whatnot. But back here in a utility room, it's not an issue, but that's the only complaint. Other than that, it's on 24/7, works perfectly. I've never had an issue. Going to be putting the hard wire here in a couple of weeks, getting ready to run a refrigerator. Refrigerator is floating somewhere out there in the Pacific Ocean, backed up on a barge like so many other things, but it's coming. But that is the only complaint I have about that inverter. It works just absolutely as it should. Very reasonably priced for a 3000 watt 12 volt inverter. And coming off the inverter, of course, we're coming into a positive and a grounded or negative bus bars. They're great, so you don't have to try and stack things up on your battery. It gives you a lot more maneuvering room. These things, of course, work as they should. Over here, got the Victron 12 volt 30 amp charger. I am loving this. I love where I've mounted it onto the wall. This thing works perfectly. It's got a preset for the lithium iron phosphate batteries, so it's just a plug and play type of a thing. and it takes care of getting it up to a full charge, and then you know, slightly reducing the current once you're up at a full charge, just perfectly to balance out all the cells in the battery. And that is just pre-programmed for that. You can also, in an advanced setting, change it to some of your more fine tuning if you want to for your own needs. But that thing works perfect. I love it. The only complaint I have about this thing is it's a little hot in operation at 30 amps. When you kick it down to its 15 amp setting, it stays pretty cool. But at 30 amps, the casing gets a little hot, but even this far away, like 1 inch on the wall, you feel no heat on the wall whatsoever. But if you touch the casing, it's hot. So definitely don't be putting this like on top of your battery in any circumstance. Keep it away from your battery. Up here at this distance from the battery, you know, there's no issue whatsoever. It's just absolutely fine. Even though it's a little hot, it's away from everything. I've felt these wires while it's in operation. No heat whatsoever. Maybe just the slightest bit of warmth on the positive wire, but nothing to be too concerned about. Got a 50 amp breaker also for the charger. It works well. You can use it as a manual disconnect if you want to. Just a, you know, reasonably priced little 50 amp breaker. Works well. And then you can see coming off of the negative end of these batteries being tied in parallel, I've got that iLi battery monitor shunt tied in before the bus bar. It's working well. It's got a little wire goes up to the positive side, and I've slipped a little 5 amp breaker right there. And that is because if you watch my previous video on when I shorted this system out, that little wire came out, sparks, blew a 200 amp fuse. Scared me to death. There's a 200 amp fuse and a manual shut off. I'm going to reverse these, put the fuse first, has been recommended to me, and then the shut off. And that's going to be coming up here. I'm waiting on a few other fuses. It's also been recommended to me to get a class T type fuse up here on the positive, and that's on the way. And then another shut off there, and another shut off for the right there. Going to put a shut off up in here for the solar panels. So those are all on order, as well as I'm going to convert everything over to color-coded wire as it should be. I was just making use of a lot of, although it's all the same gauge wire for the recommended stuff, it's not color-coded, so I need to do that and make it absolutely right. So I've got a T fuse that, like I said, we're going to put in up in here, along with another shut-off switch off the inverter. And then we're going to put a T fuse right here, and then the cutoff switch. And that particular 200 amp fuse, I'm not sure where I'll put that yet, but maybe one of you will have a suggestion. But I am listening to you guys, following your fantastic ideas for how to make this safe. It's a lot safer than it was before it blew. And just a couple more things on what I had to do after that blew to get everything up and running. So after I had blown that fuse, I was wondering if everything was going to come back the way it was supposed to. The EP-Ever and MT50 controller both retain their parameter settings that I was using. Had no problem with that whatsoever. Once I tied the system back together, they were ready to go with the parameters I was using. But this iLi monitor, during the short circuit, although it works fine, I had to reset it to what 100% full was again. Yesterday was a beautiful day, just like it is today, and this thing had forgotten, or I had blown out the memory part of it for what was 100%. So yesterday, using the Victron, which was a good way to do that, to get it up to a 100%, and then you just have to tell this again what's 100%. So it's early in the day and it's almost back to 100%, and it truly knows what 100% is again. But that was the one thing, and that was, again, a helpful recommendation from one of you, and I really appreciate that. It did not remember what 100% was. So there it shows you 28 amps coming in, 581 amp hours into a 600 amp hour bank. So it's just putting in the last 20 amp hours. And there we go. And you can see there's the percentage and the battery voltage. So finish off where we started, back at the 500 watt array that's driving that whole system. Getting up to a full charge early in the day. Everything is good on this Aloha Friday. Hope you're all going to have a good weekend, and I will catch you later. Thanks for tuning in. I'll have a few more safety upgrades coming here pretty soon as I get them. Thanks again for all your help and support. Aloha, everybody.